My dad charged me rent at 15, stole $50K in child support while I went hungry. But when my mom found out, the judge destroyed him, and now he pays back every penny he stole. I'm 17 years old. I work part-time at a convenience store, and I need to tell this story because what happened to me over the last few years basically destroyed me, but also saved me, if that makes sense. I guess I should start from the beginning, when my parents got divorced. I was 9 years old at the time, and honestly, I don't remember much about the legal process or the fights they probably had. But what I do remember perfectly is when the judge decided I was going to live with my dad. My mom didn't fight much for custody, or that's what they told me later, and for years I thought she just didn't want me enough to fight for me. You know, and that hurt more than I can explain. The first few years with my dad weren't terrible, or at least not as bad as they got later. We lived in a small house, nothing special, and he worked in construction, so sometimes he'd come home late and tired. The thing is, he was never very good at the whole being a father thing. Like, he gave me food and a roof, but that was basically it. We didn't talk much. We didn't do things together like go to the movies or play video games or whatever normal dads do with their kids. I just existed in that house. You know what I mean? Like I was just another piece of furniture. But anyway, I thought it was normal because I didn't really have anything to compare it to. When I was like 13, things started getting weird. My dad started going out more, coming home later and later, and a lot of times there wasn't even food in the house. And when I say there was no food, I'm not exaggerating. I'd literally open the fridge and there would only be condiments and maybe an old beer. I learned to make ramen in every possible way because it was the only thing my dad would buy consistently, and to this day, I can't even smell ramen without feeling nauseous. There were days when I'd go to school without breakfast, spend the whole day with my stomach growling, and come home to find the fridge just as empty. My friends, they would sometimes share their lunch with me because I think they realized something was wrong, but I never told them anything because I was embarrassed to admit that my dad had basically forgotten I needed to eat. The food situation got so bad that when I turned 15, I decided to look for a job. I lied on my application at the convenience store about my previous experience, but the manager was a laid-back guy who I think felt sorry for me or something, because he hired me for shifts after school and on weekends. The pay wasn't great, like minimum wage obviously, but for me it was everything. I could finally buy food, clothes when I needed them, school supplies without having to ask my dad for money that he never had anyway or never wanted to give me. I felt independent for the first time in my life, and even though I was exhausted all the time between school and work, at least I wasn't going to bed hungry anymore. And then, like 6 months after I started working, my dad came home one day, with a woman. He didn't tell me someone was coming, didn't say anything, just showed up with her and said, "Oh, by the way, Caleb, meet Angela. We got married last weekend." Just like that. No warning. I just stood there in the middle of the living room with my store uniform still on because I had just gotten home from work, and all I could say was something like, "Oh, okay, cool. Congratulations, I guess." Angela looked me up and down with an expression I couldn't interpret at the time, but that I understood perfectly later. It was pure contempt. She was like 35, I think, younger than my dad, who was around 42, and she looked like one of those people who are always judging everyone. You know what I mean? Things got truly horrible, like 2 weeks after Angela officially moved in. I got home from work on a Thursday night, like 9 p.m. because I had a long shift, and she was sitting at the kitchen table waiting for me. My dad was in the living room watching TV and didn't even turn around when I came in. Angela told me, "Sit down. We need to talk." And I thought maybe she was going to say something about house rules or, I don't know, normal stepmother things. But no. What she said was, "Now that you're living under my roof and eating my food, you're going to have to contribute. I need you to give me half your paycheck every 2 weeks as rent." I stayed quiet because honestly I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and when I finally processed what she said, I asked her, "Does my dad know about this?" And she just smiled and said, "It was his idea, actually." I went to the living room to confront my dad, and he didn't even pause the show. He was watching. I said, "Do I really have to pay you guys rent?" "I'm 15 years old, Dad." And he just shrugged and said something like, "You have a job so you can contribute to household expenses. It's only fair." I didn't know what to say, because part of me understood that technically it made sense, but another part the bigger part, was screaming inside that this wasn't right, that parents are supposed to take care of their kids, not the other way around. But what was I going to do? Where was I going to go? So I agreed, because I didn't have a choice. At first I thought that paying rent would be enough, that they'd leave me alone the rest of the time. But oh no. Angela had other plans. Like a week after implementing the rent thing, I came home after school, he didn't have a shift that day, and found a list taped to my bedroom door. It was a list of household chores, like wash all the dishes, clean all the bathrooms, vacuum the whole house, do everyone's laundry, and when I say everyone's, that included their laundry, obviously. There were like 15 things on that list, and at the end it said, I had to complete them all every week, or there would be consequences, without specifying what. I confronted my dad again, and this time, he didn't even let me finish talking. Just said, do what Angela asks you, and that's it. I don't want drama in this house. My dad. Next few months were basically constant hell. I had to wake up at 5:30 a.m. to get ready for school. I'd get home around 3 p.m., do homework while eating something quick that I had bought with my own money, go to work at 5 p.m., come back at 9 or 10 p.m. depending on the shift, and then I had to do the household chores from Angela's list before I could sleep. Many nights I stayed up until 1 or 2 a.m. cleaning bathrooms or folding mountains of laundry, and then I had to wake up again at 5:30. I was exhausted all the time. My grades started dropping because I'd fall asleep in class, and there were days when I literally didn't know how I was going to survive another day. Angela treated me like her personal servant. She'd yell at me if the dishes weren't perfectly dry, if she found a hair in the bathroom after I cleaned it, if her clothes weren't folded exactly the way she liked them. My dad never said anything. He'd just sit there watching TV or on his phone, ignoring everything that was happening. I wanted to yell at him, ask him how he could let them treat me like this, but I was so afraid of being left without a place to live that I kept everything inside. I felt completely alone in that house, like I was invisible except when Angela needed something from me. What finally broke me was what happened with my tips. I had been saving all the tips I got at the store in an old shoebox that I hid in my closet. It wasn't much. Like maybe I'd collect $20 or $30 a week in tips, but after several months I had managed to save like $500. I was super proud of that money because it was the first time I had managed to save anything, and my plan was to buy myself new shoes because the ones I had literally had holes in the soles, and every time it rained my feet would be soaked all day. I got home from work on a Friday night and something felt weird in my room, like someone had been there, and when I checked my closet, the shoebox was empty. Completely empty. I came out of my room, shaking with rage, something I had never felt so intensely, and found Angela in her room, organizing her closet. I asked her directly, "Where's my money?" And she didn't even turn to look at me, just said very casually, "I used it to pay some bills. You should be grateful to contribute to the house." I yelled at her. Maybe for the first time in my life, I yelled at an adult. That money was mine. That I had earned it with my work. That she had no right to take it. She turned around and looked at me with a face I'll never forget, like contempt mixed with amusement, and said, "As long as you live in my house, everything you earn is mine if I decide it's mine. And if you don't like it, you can leave." My dad heard the yelling and came to see what was happening, and when I explained what Angela had done, you know what he said? He said, "It's not that big a deal, Caleb. You can save again. Stop being dramatic." That night, I cried, for the first time in years. I locked myself in my room, threw myself on the bed, and cried until I had no more tears left. I felt completely defeated, like no matter how much I worked or how hard I tried, it was never going to be enough. I was never going to be able to get out of that situation. I thought about running away, going to live with a friend or something, but I knew that would only cause more problems, and I'd probably end up in social services or somewhere worse. I felt trapped in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The next day, Saturday morning, I made a decision. I took out my old phone that I almost never used because I barely had a data plan and looked up my mom's number. I hadn't talked to her in like 6 years, since shortly after the divorce when she stopped calling and trying to see me. Part of me hated her for abandoning me, but another part, the desperate part, thought that maybe, just maybe, she could help me. It took me like half an hour to gather the courage to dial the number, and when I finally did and she answered, after the third ring, all I could say was, "Mom, it's me, Caleb. I need help," before I started crying again. My mom was quiet for a moment that felt eternal, and then she said, "Tell me what's happening, son." And I told her everything, absolutely everything, from the lack of food to the rent I had to pay to Angela stealing my money to the endless household chores. I told her I was exhausted, that I couldn't take it anymore, that I needed to get out of there but didn't know how. She listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished talking, she said something that left me completely frozen. She said, "Caleb, your dad has been receiving child support from me this whole time. I've been sending him like $800 a month since the divorce for your support." I couldn't process what I was hearing. My dad had been receiving $800 monthly, specifically for me, and had let me go hungry, had forced me to. I work at 15 years old to survive when he had money he was legally supposed to use to take care of me? The rage I felt in that moment made the previous night seem like nothing. I asked my mom why she had never verified that the money was being used correctly, and she admitted it had been her mistake, that she had assumed my dad was fulfilling his responsibility, that when he stopped answering her calls about visiting me, she eventually gave up and just kept sending the money, thinking that at least that helped. My mom told me she was going to do something about it, not to worry, that she would get me out of there. We hung up, and I just sat on my bed, for I don't know how long, processing everything. I felt a weird mix of relief because finally someone was listening to me and validating that what they were doing to me wasn't right. But I also felt terror about what my dad and Angela would do when they found out I had called my mom. Like 2 weeks later, the legal papers arrived. My dad was served with court documents while he was at work, and he came home absolutely furious. He yelled at me about how dare I call my mom, that I was ungrateful, that he had given me a roof over my head all this time, and this is how I repaid him. Angela was there too, yelling that I was a liar, that she had never stolen money from me, that I was making things up to cause trouble. I tried to stay calm, not let them provoke me, but it was hard because part of me wanted to yell back at them all the horrible things they had done to me. Instead, I just said, "Everything I told my mom is true, and I can prove it." My mom had hired a lawyer, and that lawyer contacted me directly to ask for evidence of everything I had said. I started gathering everything I could, receipts for food I had bought with my money, text messages where Angela asked me for more money in addition to the rent I was already giving her, dated photos of the chore list taped to my door. I also wrote what my mom called a resignation letter, basically a document detailing all the abuse and neglect, specific dates, specific amounts of money, everything I could remember. It was painful to write all that and see my life, from the last few years summarized in pages of trauma, but it was also liberating in some strange way. The atmosphere in the house during the weeks before the court hearing was unbearable. Angela didn't even talk to me anymore, just glared at me every time she saw me. My dad alternated between completely ignoring me and making passive-aggressive comments about how I had betrayed the family. I basically lived locked in my room when I wasn't at school or work, only coming out to go to the bathroom or grab something to eat quickly. I slept with my door locked because, honestly, I was afraid Angela would try to do something to get revenge. Finally, the day of the hearing arrived. I was 16 by then, almost 17, and I was super nervous. I had never been in a court, and even though my mom's lawyer had prepared me for what to expect, I was still terrified that somehow my dad would convince the judge I was lying or exaggerating. The hearing lasted like 3 hours, and I had to testify about everything. Answer questions from my mom's lawyer, my dad's lawyer, and the judge. It was humiliating, having to admit in front of strangers that my dad had neglected me so much, that I had gone hungry in his house, that they had treated me like a servant. I cried a couple of times during my testimony, which embarrassed me, but my mom's lawyer later told me that probably helped because it showed how real and painful the situation was. My dad also had to testify, and seeing him there, trying to justify what he had done, was almost comical if it weren't so sad. He said he used the child support money for the house mortgage and utilities, that technically that counted as expenses for me because I lived there. He said he had put me to work to teach me responsibility, not because there was no food. He said the rent. thing was to prepare me for the real world, that charging me wasn't illegal. The judge didn't look convinced at all, especially after my mom's lawyer presented all the receipts I had collected, showing I was spending all my money on food and basic necessities that my dad should have been covering with the child support. When it was Angela's turn, she basically played the victim. She said she had tried to be a good stepmother, that I was rebellious and difficult, that I had made up the stolen money thing because I didn't like her. But my mom's lawyer destroyed her with specific questions she couldn't answer consistently, and you could tell she was lying because she kept changing her story. The judge at one point literally interrupted her and told her she could face perjury charges if she continued lying under oath, and after that, she shut up pretty quickly. The judge took a recess of like half an hour to review all the evidence and deliberate, and that half hour felt like the longest eternity of my life. When we returned to the courtroom, the judge gave his verdict, and I literally felt like a giant weight lifted off my shoulders. He ruled in my mom's favor, granted her full custody of me with immediate effect, and ordered my dad to pay back all the misused child support from recent years, which added up to like $50,000 or something like that. He also said he was going to refer the case to Child Protective Services to investigate whether there was basis for criminal neglect charges. I left the court with my mom and the lawyer, and honestly, I didn't know how to feel. I was relieved, obviously, but also weird, like I couldn't believe it was finally over. My mom hugged me in the parking lot and apologized like 1,000 times for not being there for me, for having assumed I was okay, for not having fought harder for me when she should have. I didn't know what to say to her because I was still processing years of conflicting feelings toward her, but in that moment, I just let myself be hugged because I needed to feel that someone cared about me. I had to go back to my dad's house one last time to get my things, and my mom and the lawyer came with me just in case. Angela wasn't even there. I think she didn't want to see me, and my dad didn't say a word either, just stayed in his room with the door closed while I packed the little I had. It took me like 30 minutes to fit my entire life into 2 suitcases and a backpack, and when I left that house for the last time, I didn't look back once. Now I'm 17 years old, almost 18, and I live with my mom in a small but comfortable apartment. The relationship with her is still in the process of repair. I'm not going to lie and say everything is perfect because there's still resentment on my part for the years she wasn't there. But we're working on it. She goes to therapy with me every 2 weeks, which helps. I still work at the convenience store, but now it's by choice, not out of necessity, and I'm saving for college and to eventually move out on my own. My grades have improved because I can finally get enough sleep and focus on school. My dad eventually had to start paying what the court ordered. I think they're garnishing it directly from his paycheck. I haven't talked to him since I moved out, and honestly, I don't feel like doing it. Maybe someday I'll be able to forgive him. I don't know. But right now, I just don't want anything to do with him. Angela and him are still married, as far as I know, and I guess they deserve each other. Last week, my mom asked me if I was happy, and the truth is, I don't know if I can say I'm happy yet. I'm better, definitely, and I finally feel like I have a future in front of me instead of just surviving day to day. But there are parts of me that are still angry, that are still hurt, that will probably take years to heal completely. And I guess that's okay. That I don't have to be perfectly fine for this to count as a victory.